In 2022, I saw 14 new feature film length releases. I'll be reviewing these films and ranking them from worst to best. This isn't really a definitive list, but more of a general feel. When rating movies, I try to take into account all aspects of the film, but most importantly, how it made me feel. I also tend to take potential into account. Noticeably, imperfect movies may be ranked above other nearly flawless ones because there was just something I liked more about it. And of course, this is my opinion. So please don't send a mob after me because I ranked number 4 above number 5. So here is that list, starting off with the worst at number 14.
Taste is simply just knowing how something makes you feel. So how does it make you feel?
This movie is boring and I don't like any of the characters. Marion? Boring. Also a selfish backstabbing bitch. Tom? A selfish backstabbing bitch. And boring. Patrick? He was okay some of the time, but there's this tricky little issue where he really doesn't get consent with Tom. Tom clearly is not interested at first, and Patrick pushes through it. And I understand that Tom is a repressed homosexual, but that doesn't mean you can suck the homophobia out of him. Really, though, I can't express how much I hate the character of Tom in both the past and the present. He's an absolute miscreant. He's unfair and cruel to the two people who love him. And why do they love him? He has no good qualities. He honestly doesn't really have any qualities. Marion and Patrick share more interests with each other than Tom does with either of them. His chemistry with Patrick is based solely on forbidden attraction, and he has no chemistry whatsoever with Marion. Marion and Patrick are such obvious spoils for one another, and it irks me. I do like how Marion tries to redeem herself for her actions against Patrick, but I think she could have done better or done more. And the lengths she went to tear Tom and Patrick apart, even after her other friend came out as gay, makes her just a really despicable person, no matter how much she tries to make up for it at the end. I did kind of like the ending, but the film just cut off when I finally received the moment I had been waiting for the entire movie, and that was disappointing.
You're a fucking sex symbol.
Do you like movies about sweaty and unlikable young adults being murdered one by one in the sweltering Texas heat? You'll probably like this movie. I didn't. X really did not bring anything new to the slasher genre. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but with porn, and I'm not really a fan of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's hard to watch movies when none of the characters are especially likable, especially slashers, because I don't care who dies, or when, or how. I was only rooting for Jenna Ortega's character because I love Jenna Ortega, and I don't have anything against the other actors. In fact, I do really like some of them. Kid Cudi got me through high school, but I couldn't give a damn about their characters. And just when I think, maybe I'd like to get to know them better, they die. Mia Goth, as Pearl, very nearly gave me nightmares. I was so concerned through the whole movie because the camera wouldn't focus on the old couple, and it was giving me the creeps. But everything about Pearl creeped me the fuck out and made every scene with her really hard to watch. There is absolutely nothing I can say about this film that hasn't already been said. Don't Worry Darling isn't great. We all know that. But I wouldn't call it horrible. It's kinda pretty. I like the costumes and the cinematography wasn't bad. So much so that it almost tricked me into thinking this movie was decent. But I'd say it's a little less than decent. Not the abomination some people make it out to be. It's lackluster. There are plot holes. Nothing really makes sense. For example, the random dance scene that Harry Styles does after receiving a promotion, which he seems rather worried about. Yet I think there is an interesting concept going on. Had it maybe been properly done, I believe it would have been much better.
Do not eat. Taste.
The dialogue for this one just felt off. The story was underwhelming, very slow to start, and had me waiting for more until I realized more was not coming. I initially thought the film was going to take an and then there were none route, especially when the tortillas started coming out, but I was disappointed when I realized the characters were not going to be killed, or maimed, or poisoned one by one. I do, however, think the satire was done really well. Fantastically, even. And there were good performances by Ralph Fiennes and Anya Taylor-Joy. I liked John Leguizamo's and Amy Carrero's characters, and really wanted to get to know more about them. I think I would have rather watched the movie from their perspectives. While the point is that some of these characters are grating, oh my god, I could not stand half of these characters. Tyler was an abomination. Every time he spoke, my soul shriveled. Those three guys, I don't know their names, and I don't care. Their dialogue sounded so fake and so overdone, and I hated it. And everyone else, I didn't care. Even Anya Taylor-Joy's character bordered on uninteresting, and she's the center of this story. She is meant to be our hero. She is supposed to be the one that represents the audience. The ending was pretty cool, though. It went out with a bang, but I think the bang could have been a lot stronger if there had been a more solid build-up throughout the film, rather than a slow build-up and then staying static for a long time.
People forget about the creatures who live in shells.
I don't feel strongly one way or another when it comes to this movie. Everything about it was just fine. I think the backstory when she was a kid was drawn out a little too much, but this also comes from someone who never read the book, so take that with a grain of salt. Like most book-to-movie adaptations, I'm sure a lot was missing. From someone who solely consumed the movie, it just felt distracting from the main story. I believe it was certainly relevant, but could have been trimmed down a bit. And I think each of the romance storylines makes the movie feel a lot longer than it is. In a way, though, I feel it is a sign of good pacing. Nothing feels rushed when it comes to the relationships between the characters. Unfortunately, it made the movie feel very drawn out. Overall, I would have liked to see a little more focus on the mystery and a little more tension surrounding it. The tension is there, but I think it could have been taken up a few notches. And while the story is enjoyable, there's nothing particularly riveting about the characters, or most of what is happening. It's lacking a passion that could have made the film more powerful. However, the ending certainly makes it memorable. I think that Kaya's world was created excellently, and you really got to feel like a part of it. I'm not one for the American marshy South, but where the Crawdads sing makes it enchanting.
You don't have bad luck.
Really? My bad luck is biblical.
Bullet Train should have been fantastic. It's an action comedy with an ensemble cast. My favorite. But something about it just felt off. It should be funny, but it's not. Some of the jokes try too hard to appeal to modern internet culture. Some are way too repetitive when they weren't really been delivered well the first time. And the comedic timing is just off. There were certainly some funny moments, but in comparison to how many funny moments there should have been, it's drastically low. But everything about this movie feels like it has something missing. The characters should be more interesting than what they are. They are given adequate screen time, backstories, the whole 9 yards. Plenty of seasoned actors were present, but it felt like almost none of them did anything noteworthy. Oh, and I swear every fake accent in this film is so bad. Like Leonardo DiCaprio bad. I highly disliked Joey King's character, the prince. I found her to be very annoying. She was much too uninteresting and flat for someone who is the villain for the majority of the story. I think it would have come across better if someone younger, like an actual kid, played the part. Then things may have made more sense, why she acts the way she does, her motivations, the fact that everyone perceives her as a sweet little girl. There's nothing particularly unlikable about Brad Pitt's Ladybug, but there's nothing that particularly stands out about him either. He's a punchline, but the joke is missing. I did find the Channing Tatum bit entertaining, my favorite Channing Tatum role ever, 10 out of 10, but with such an A-list cast, I would have expected a little more. The actors read their lines like they were in a room by themselves. The flow is lacking, and they don't bounce off of each other as much as they should. Still, despite its mediocre traits, the film is still pretty interesting and entertaining. I like how all the characters and their individual stories fit together as a part of one really big story, even if I think it could have been executed a little better. And even after everything I just said, I think I might like the film more on a rewatch than I did when I first saw it in theaters, because my expectations are pretty low, and I know what to expect now. So this time, I can go in and have more fun while watching it instead of viewing it from a critical lens.
Look, I've been dreaming about this since I was a kid. And somehow you already knew that.
Uncharted is predictable, but it still makes for an enjoyable, if easy, watch. Tom Holland's Nathan is basically Spider-Man, and Mark Wahlberg is... I don't like Mark Wahlberg, but his character, Sully, is tolerable, probably in part because he's not painted to be super likable, which is good when it's coming from this face. There's nothing new or exciting to the genre. The film follows all of the expected beats, but it's still pretty fun if you like adventure movies. The action is consistent and the story moves at a good pace. Nothing is lingered on for too long, but it doesn't move excessively fast either. I found the jokes to be funny, particularly when age jokes were made at Sully's expense, usually by Nathan. And usually such quips would feel cheap and overused, but I think it was executed pretty well. There's a clear setup for a sequel, and I wouldn't be surprised if a second movie wasn't made, but I would still be open to checking it out. So all in all, very simple, but still mildly entertaining.
I can't change what happened to you in the past, but together we may be able to help protect other people.
Like Uncharted, She Said follows all the traditional linear beats, and the writing is straightforward, but that doesn't make the movie bad. And with the subject matter taken into consideration, I think that's fine. With the incident being so recent and sensitive, She Said doesn't need to be experimental. Carey Mulligan is for sure a feminist icon recently coming off of a killer performance in Promising Young Woman, one of my favorites of 2020. She and Zoe Kazan are equally excellent in their roles as real-life journalists Megan Twohey and Jodie Cantor. I love investigative journalistic movies, and this one doesn't disappoint. I found it to be much better than similar recent movies such as Bombshell and Hustlers. The subject matter is taken with care, and of course we know what the ending will be, but the film still manages to build tension. I wasn't blown away by any performances, but I thought the vast majority were good and managed to be moving. I found myself getting emotional in the theater listening to the women's stories, and I admit I cried more than once. I think this movie, while important now, will gain in importance as the years pass and will become more appreciated by future audiences. Sadly, I think its poor performance at the box office, as well as the reviews that followed, reinforce just how important the Me Too movement is and how it's already being left behind. My biggest issue with the film is not within the film, but that its producer, the very famous Brad Pitt, could be called a bit hypocritical in deciding to involve himself with this movie. But I think the movie itself is just fine. It's simple, but it's a good story, and the actors give moving performances. So here's where things start getting really good.
I know you're scared, but I'm not gonna hurt you anymore.
Technically, this is a 2021 film, but it wasn't available in theaters until mid-2022, so I am counting this on this list. There's something I love about watching kids growing up in decades past, like Stranger Things and The Sandlot, and The Black Phone is no different. I think it really captures a time period well. Even though I have not lived in this time period, it still brings up a sense of nostalgia, but I don't think it overdoes it either. Ethan Hawke is excellent in his role as the grabber. He fits this role so perfectly. His presence constantly had me on the edge of my seat, knowing that his demeanor could change at the drop of a dime. Child actors are usually a hit or miss, but these kids were excellent. Mason Thames gives a wonderful performance as our hero, Finney, but I think Madeline McGraw playing his sister Gwen really stood out. Her emotional performance during the scene between Gwen and their father where he is beating her really struck me. Her reaction was just so genuine, and I really appreciated the dynamic between her and her brother as well. We only get to see or hear each of the previous kidnapped kids briefly, but each one feels like a new character. as they should. They aren't copies of one another, which could be expected considering how briefly they are present in the story. Even though I love this movie, I feel like something is missing. I would have liked to see the grabber a little more fleshed out, but part of the horror is understandably not knowing much about him. Aside from a thing or two, we know as much as the kids do. We don't know why he's doing what he's doing. There are hints of a cycle of abuse. But do we really need to know? The unnerviness of not knowing adds to the realness of the atmosphere. While I think the movie could have been a little longer to add screen time to underdeveloped aspects, I think it was still pretty excellent. The ending feels so justifiable, everything has been building to that moment, and I think it's executed well.
I need to know that I have done one thing right with my life!
Really, none of these characters should be likable. They've all done bad things, and almost always this bad seems to outweigh the good. I'm the kind of person who can't enjoy a story if I don't like the characters, but even though these people do bad things, they aren't bad people. They're just regular people who make bad decisions when they have bad feelings. I can't hate them because they feel too real. Or it might be because it was so well acted. Brendan Fraser was wonderful, of course. Other standouts are Hong Chow and Sadie Sink, but Ty Simpkins and Samantha Morton also gave great performances. In 2 hours, we get to see the main characters fully fleshed out. I love big ensemble casts, but I think this movie really benefits from a small cast in a single setting. The time is given to carefully craft each character and explore their backstories that explain why they are the way they are. These characters are not one-dimensional, and their stories are heavily layered. If you ever watch someone you love destroy themselves, or if you have tried to destroy yourself, that's what watching this movie is like. Self-harm in a not so violent but still very destructive way. We get to see how trauma and tragedy affects people differently and how it follows them in their day-to-day life years later. Nothing gets downplayed. I expected this movie to be a downer, and it is. But there are lighthearted moments, and I thought the ending was extremely powerful. And even through all this negativity, we get to see this through Charlie's lens, which is very optimistic. I expected myself to feel empty while watching this and numb by the time the credits began to roll, but instead I wholly felt emotions and a great appreciation for this film. It should have been painfully long, but the pacing was surprisingly good. Not quick by any means, but it allowed the correct amount of time to experience every scene in a way that felt natural.
I don't want to make her pay. I want to burn her to the ground.
Like Eleanor, I too am a disciple of the 90s teen movie. If you like teen movies such as 10 Things I Hate About You or Clueless, you'll love this movie. And especially if you like revenge thrillers too, or darker teen movies like Heathers or Jawbreaker. This set is so damn colorful. The costumes are gorgeous. I love how Eleanor and Drea both have their own unique styles that just fit them so well, yet neither looks out of place next to the other. Maya Hawke and Camila Mendes are both excellent and believable in their roles, as well as Austin Abrams, who plays the soft boy antagonist Max, who simultaneously crushes and enforces toxic male stereotypes. Sophie Turner's acting is a bit over the top, but it fits her character perfectly, so I really can't make any complaints. And of course we get LGBTQ plus representation served to us by the lovely Maya Hawke, who is already an icon for queer youth everywhere via her role as Robin in Stranger Things. The soundtrack is just something else. It perfectly blends songs from the 90s, like The Impression That I Get and Celebrity Skin, with pop hits of today like Brutal and Dum Dum. One of my favorite parts of the movie is when Happier Than Ever by Billie Eilish is playing and Eleanor watches herself in the mirror like she's seen who she's become for the first time. Do Revenge is one of the better representations of Gen Z that I've seen on screen. In the opening scene, I was a little skeptical for how the rest of the movie was going to go, but it shortly after proved me wrong. Do Revenge perfectly encapsulates Gen Z in a way perfect of an era-defining movie without going overboard. Sometimes you can tell when a teen movie is written by much older people by an overuse of unrealistic stereotypes and lingo, and while some of that is present in this film, as it is in most films of its genre, it feels like just the right amount to still be believable. I appreciate that the film actively critiques things while still adhering to them, such as the makeover montage scene. We all know that makeover scenes are problematic, but they are essential to the teen film experience. It also brings to light ideas that have been around but were less acceptable in the past and weren't normally touched on in these sorts of movies. It normalizes queer relationships and polyamory, it addresses misogyny and privilege, and doesn't frame Drea as being at fault for the video scandal. I've read some reviews where people thought the movie began going downhill with the twist reveal, but for me it just got even better. I think it fits into the film perfectly and makes the viewing experience more interesting on a second watch. And while the film is a big homage to previous teen films, it can very well stand on its own. And not just that, but it stands out and rightfully earns its place among these movies, partially in thanks to that twist. I had a lot of fun watching everything unfold, and I can easily place this one in my top 100, as well as the rest of the films on this list.
I know you. With every passing moment, you feel you might have missed your chance to make something of your life.
There is so much to say about this movie that I don't even know where to start, so I'm just going to talk about the basics. The Daniels have made yet another amazing film that analyzes life, love, and what it means to be a small person in a big world. This means if you haven't seen their other film, Swiss Army Man, you should get on that right now. Ke Huy Quan is excellent in his role. Waymond is the perfect man, and we all know it. He has ruined everyone else for me. Stephanie Hsu's performance brought tears to my eyes. I felt everything she said on such a deep level. And of course, we can't talk about this film without talking about Michelle Yeoh. She is excellent. We get to see every aspect of Evelyn's life, and she plays each part so well. She gives such a great performance. The universe where Evelyn is a famous actress feels so reminiscent of Wong Kar-wai's films. So dreamy and melancholy, but wholly beautiful, making me feel bittersweet nostalgia for something I never experienced. The Ratatouille parody, Raccacoonie, was easily the funniest thing I saw all year. I got emotional over the breakup of hot dog finger lesbians, and even the rocks were excellent. The silence was deafening. There are so many worlds in this one story, and each one is so excellently crafted. I laughed, I cried, and I felt emotions like I was feeling them for the first time. I went into this film blind and was happily caught off guard by most of it. I didn't expect any of it, and that was wonderful. There are just so many aspects of this film to love, from its sweet and funny moments to its heartbreaking and tender ones. Every time I finish a Daniels film, the absurdist in me is reborn. I find reasons to remind me that I am alive and I am far from perfect, but that's okay.
We're fine.
No. I really don't think I am.
Bones and All is one of the most impactful films I've not only seen this year, but ever. I wanted to see this one after learning there would be another collaboration between Luca Guadagnino and Timothée Chalamet. Bones and All is certainly not Call Me By Your Name, but I adore both. Guadagnino is a master at portraying touching and tragic love stories. While it has horror elements, at its heart, this film is a romance, specifically a coming-of-age road trip romance for outcasts. Sure, the beginning is a little hard to watch and pretty disgusting, but I promise it gets easier as the film goes on. For the most part, the biggest shockers are early in the film. While the munching, crunching, and slurping was rightfully nasty, Mark Rylance's performance as Sully is what really made my skin crawl. The creepy old man that watches from a distance and gets too close for comfort is the real horror of this film. While the film is set in the 80s, it just feels so timeless. The portrayal of Midwest America feels so real and close to home. I feel entirely transported into the movie while watching it. I adore Lee and Marin, played by Timothée Chalamet and Taylor Russell respectively. I appreciate their differences in their approaches to cannibalism, the innate desire versus the guilt that follows. They have different approaches to dealing with trauma,
and while they conflict in that aspect, they fit together so perfectly. It truly feels like they are meant for each other, and I can't imagine their stories turning out any other way. And I have to mention the music. I love the soundtrack and score. I love the way it mixes new wave and synth pop songs like Save a Prayer, Atmosphere, and The Sun Always Shines on TV with a dark and hauntingly eerie score composed by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. There is one point in the movie where a song from the score is playing over a song from the soundtrack, and it just brings all those dark underlying feelings to the surface and creates just a highly unique atmosphere. The only complaint I have with Bones and All is that I didn't want it to end. The ending stuck with me for days, so much so that I had to go back to the theater to see it again. It is so beautiful and touching, and I highly recommend it.
答案结束的瞬间，我答案就开始了。
Decision to Leave is easily one of the best films of the year, and I hope in time it will be considered one of the best films ever. Park Chan-wook is a master at storytelling. He continues to outdo himself with every film, and Decision to Leave is no exception. The cinematography and directing choices make this film look phenomenal. Every image has such an impact. Every shot, every camera angle. This film cemented Park Chan-wook as my favorite director. I have seen 8 Park Chan-wook films, and I'd place this as a close second to The Handmaiden, but I could see myself loving this one even more with time. I've watched this film twice now, and there are just so many things to pick up on and examine on a rewatch, and I know I'll continue to pick up on things each time I watch it, because the people who made this film put so much effort into the detail. The love story between Hae-jun and So-rae is strikingly beautiful. It's a very emotional relationship, seldom physical, as in typical romantic dramas. This, combined with their detective-suspect relationship, only adds to the tension. Tong Wei is wonderful in her role. She never allows the other characters nor the audience to fully understand her intentions. She draws us and Hae-jun in like a moth to a flame, incredibly apprehensive, but so overcome with intrigue. Park Hae-il's performance is one of the best I've ever seen. He is an expert at displaying emotions, both subtle and obvious. In contrast with his earlier role in Memories of Murder, in which you can't tell what he is thinking or feeling at all. It really shows just the sheer range of what he is capable of from just his face alone. He is not simply playing a part, but embodying the characters. The ending scene is just so beautiful and heartbreaking, and visually it's stunning. It is one of my favorite scenes of all time. Every single choice about this movie just feels so deliberate. Everything is how it's meant to be. I would call this film an undebatable masterpiece, one that is meant to be consumed over and over again. There's a lot of films I missed this year, but I think I watched a decent range from god-awful to really fucking good. I intend to make more movie reviews as well as longer film analysis essays. If you enjoyed this video or love movies and would like to see more of something like this, consider liking and subscribing. Let me know what you thought of these films and what films I missed and what some of your favorites of 2022 were.